It takes one playtester to make all these fucking weird-ass decisions, and they're like, what? We never intended that. Why are you doing that? That throws the whole thing out of whack.
Right, the game just crashes at the end.
Yeah.
It's like, we expect you to go 100% evil or 100% good. You can't...
We didn't expect you to, like, shit on all these people and then go find a box of puppies and give them to the next person you find. The game was not intended for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically the idea, but I mean, that sounds like Grand Theft Auto, essentially, though. I mean, that sounds like the type of thing... I wish Grand Theft Auto would let you just shit on people as you're running around. Hey, don't worry, 6 will be out eventually.
You know, that's one thing they put, like, when you play, like, the online game, a lot of times when I sign into the online portion of the game, your character is taking a shower.
Mm-hmm.
That's just where he starts. They have a bathroom. You never have to make the character take a shit or something. Like, maybe it'll be like, you know, you have to go to fast food restaurants, you have to eat to keep, like, your character from getting hungry, but then once you eat and start running around, then it's starting to digest, and then you have to go to the bathroom, stop periodically, and take a shit.
So you want your Grand Theft Auto 6 character to basically be a Tamagotchi. Like,
it just eats, sleeps, and shits. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bragana Super Friends, where these violent delights have violent ends. I'm your host, Brian Labick, and my fellow guest for this week is Mike Bradley.
Hello. I guess I'm the only one that watched Westworld.
I thought I was going to steal your intro. I thought you might have something along those lines. Yeah, and then of course it raises the question, are you a guest? Are you a host? Am I a host? And then, like, of course, the more when I sort of wrote that out, I was like, oh, that could be a good intro. Then I'm thinking, you know, that really going to confuse people if they're not familiar with the terminology of Westworld and they still think we're talking about podcasting.
Yeah, if they're not up on it and everything, that would be rather confusing. Hopefully you'll get it by the end of the show.
Or, yeah, watching the show. You probably, I don't know if you'll get it from our show. See how well we explain this stuff. But yeah, if you've listened to last week's episode, when we got around to we did the What's Up With You segment, we were sort of catching up with everybody. I had mentioned that I recently finished the HBO series Westworld. Just to throw out some of the names involved with this. It's created by Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan, produced by J.J. Abrams. It is based on a film from 1973, which is also called Westworld, which was written and directed by Michael Crichton. This iteration of the series, the television show, stars Evan Rachel Wood, James Marsden, Thandie Newton, Ed Harris, Jeffrey Wright, and Anthony Hopkins. That list of talent is fan-fucking-tastic. So if just that list of people doesn't get you to want to check this show out, I don't know what you're waiting for.
Yeah, that's what got me hooked. I mean, I had heard a lot about it, and the thing that made me... I mean, your recommendation came in big. I went and I looked again at the cast, and it was kind of like, yeah, all right. Anthony Hopkins and Ed Harris can carry anything, and the others are great, too. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, because you had mentioned, like, after we talked about it last week, that was the kick in the ass that you needed to motivate you to finally sit down and watch it?
Yeah, it really was, because it was kind of like, okay, he wants to do a show on it. It's time to watch it, you know, because I got nothing on the shelf for a couple of days there, and
yeah, you went
weekend and went through it.
I was going to say, you went through the 10 episodes pretty quick. Did it take you 2 days?
We started, I don't know, I want to say like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and then finished by like 8 o'clock the following day.
Damn, okay.
So we watched a couple episodes, got up, did our morning routine, and then watched the rest of it pretty much throughout the whole day.
Yeah, it's a full day.
Yeah. I mean, it's not terribly long. It's not catching up on Game of Thrones. You know, it's one season, it's 10 episodes. It's not daunting, you know, but it is, you know, it's definitely a show where you're going to finish one episode and you're not going to want to be like, we'll go do something else and then come back to it. You're going to want to continue to watch this show.
And then when I was talking about last week, I mentioned how I sort of caught up after it was on, and how I stayed away from the spoilery talk online and the speculation and all that stuff like that. Were you glad you guys watched it the way you did, like straight through like that, without, or did you look up anything, or did you just go straight through and?
The only thing I looked up ahead of time was the cast. Okay. Yeah, I mean, just seeing like who's involved with it, I always will kind of do ahead of time. Yeah, I didn't want any of the spoilers or anything like that, of course.
Okay.
And I mean, if I could keep myself from watching the whole season of The Walking Dead and then just watching it all in like a 2-day period, I would absolutely do it. But when that new episode's out there, it's like, I can't wait. I have to watch it. But when I'm catching on after a show's finished a season, I absolutely prefer it that way.
Okay.
Because I don't know, I don't like the wait. Like, this gap right now for The Walking Dead that you go through every stinking year in the middle of the season, you go through that gap where you get, 2 months where you're not going to see any Walking Dead, and it's like, I don't understand why. Just give it back and continue on with it. But, I mean, I kind of feel like a lot of shows are going to go that route the further we get into the internet watching era. Yeah. That we have now, the way that the Marvel shows have gone, where it's just like, okay, this is the day the whole season releases. Yeah. And put everything out on day one.
Watch it at your leisure should be the model for most television shows, I think. It works a lot better that way.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of television shows people tell me about, and it's like, I don't get that channel, and I do get the channel, and I'm not home on those days. Like, it's on, say, like, this day at 9 o'clock, and it's like, I'm not available that day at 9 o'clock. I never am, so when am I going to watch it? It's not on Hulu. I'd have to buy it on Amazon without knowing if I like it or not.
Yeah.
I'm not really going to be in for that.
So last week, when we were talking about it with the What's Up With You segment, I gave my spoiler-free impressions and what I thought. So since we'll probably be getting into spoilers fairly shortly here, just for anyone that hasn't watched, Mike, do you want to give your spoiler-free overall impressions of what the show, if you agree with me on my recommendation, or if you say, no, he doesn't know what he's talking about, don't watch the show?
Well, what I'll tell you is that this show is incredibly well acted for what these people, I mean, especially Evan Rachel Wood and Thandie Newton, I think more so than the rest. Not that the others didn't do a fantastic job of acting, but their roles playing the way they had to was incredible. I mean, it was incredibly well done. It's a very interesting show in many ways that will make you think a little bit. And I'll get into some of the things that makes, it can bring up some various existential ideas for people to think about. And it's also beautifully shot. It's not a spoiler of any kind. This is, a Western setting. And the Western setting they present, they have some very well thought out set pieces. And if you can't watch Anthony Hopkins these days, I don't know who you are, but watch some more Anthony Hopkins and you'll find yourself more interested in things.
Is that your glowing recommendation for Transformers 5?
No. No.
Because he's in Transformers 5.
But what is he in Transformers 5?
Well, we don't know that, but...
Is he the voice of a Transformer, or is he Anthony Hopkins? Because if he's playing a person, a human being, I'm all in on it. Sure, I'll watch it, and I'll probably like it better than I would other Transformer movies. If he's the voice of a Transformer, count me out. Forget it.
I want to say he is Anthony, like he's a person in there. I'm pretty sure he's in the trailer. Like, you see him in the trailer.
I didn't really... Like, the trailer was not grabbing me that strongly for me to take notice of every little thing, so I didn't.
But you're on record. You're on record saying that if he is a person in this movie, it is sold.
It's sold on me watching it. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I'm sure Anthony Hopkins will kick ass in Transformers just like he always does. That doesn't necessarily help the movie around it or the writing that went into the movie and everything like that, because look at Thor: The Dark World. It's still probably dead last or close to it on most people's favorite Marvel movies list. And, you know, overall that movie was, it was okay. But Anthony Hopkins as Odin was incredible, just like always. The guy, he's a can't miss. Like,
yeah.
There's a few of those in Hollywood. There really is. There's so few. And I believe, honestly, they took 2 of them here for Westworld.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel Ed Harris is the same way. I feel he has been for a long time. He's very underrated, I believe, these days. Maybe in the 90s he wasn't quite as underrated, but...
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll try to come back to that Anthony Hopkins thing later. Assuming that any of us actually try to go see Transformers when it comes out.
No. I mean, it'll be Blu-ray. Yeah. I mean, this will be Netflix sending me the disc. That's all that'll be. I'm not going in the theater.
That might be something like I see at the drive-in or something. I don't know if I can pay $10 to see it at the theater.
When does it come out?
Sometime this summer.
Maybe it'll be like a double feature with Spider-Man, and it'll just be like the throw-on ad to Spider-Man.
I could see it that way.
I mean, that's how I saw the Clone Wars. They pushed me into the Clone Wars movie because I saw it. I actually had to sit through the Clone Wars movie before The Dark Knight. So,
could be worse. Double bill. It's not bad. It's not a great movie, but it's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, at that time, it was really struggling through it because the show wasn't around yet, and it wasn't there yet.
All right, so back to Westworld. I think you had mentioned that you and your wife watched it together, right?
Yes, we both watched it.
Does she normally watch that kind of stuff with you, or is this like out of her wheelhouse that you got her to watch this?
She's somebody who, if she's not aware that it's a sci-fi thing and she gets hooked into it and finds out it's actually good, she's all about it, and she is fine with it. But if I tell her ahead of time that it's a science fiction kind of thing, she tends to shy away a little bit.
Fair enough.
But then she ends up liking them when she watches them. So
she did like this one.
From what I understand, she did like it a lot. Yes.
Okay. One of the things I actually forgot to bring it up last week when I was talking about it. Part of my recommendation, I guess, is I absolutely love the music to this show. There's
the organ.
Yeah, there's a few like they cover some songs and they make them like the Saloony Bar style. Like Black Hole Sun's in there. Back to Black, I think, is an Amy Winehouse song. House of the Rising Sun. All of those are fantastic. Black. Yeah. I had to buy some of those songs off iTunes because I thought they were so fucking cool.
Oh, you mean the versions they used?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of a surprise because I think Black Hole Sun's the first one they do.
That was the first one I recognized, yeah.
Yeah, it like, because I said, holy shit, is that Black Hole Sun? And I'm like, it is. That's strange. I didn't expect that.
I think they're just like sweeping up the bar or something at that time. Like there's nothing happening. There's just 2 people in the saloon and it's playing in the background. Either way, the music caught my attention. I thought it was really, really freaking cool. I think that rendition of Paint It Black was probably my favorite. I still listen to that. I think it's fantastic.
I haven't listened to any of them again, so now I'm going to have to.
Yeah, like I went specifically for the ones that they cover. Those were the ones that stood out to me. Those are the ones I like the best.
I feel like a few of them were covered as well. I feel like they were all covered, and some of them I just don't know. Like I didn't recognize some of them. I don't know.
Like when I looked at the soundtrack, like there are probably other covers that I don't know of or I didn't find or look at that hard enough. But I think like half the soundtrack too is just like the orchestral type of normal soundtrack music.
Oh yeah. I was just talking about the
piano ones.
Yeah, the piano songs.
Yeah.
I think those were all covers is what I was getting at with that. I don't know about for certain. I'd have to listen to them all and try and figure it out. But
yeah, some of them I guess probably just weren't in my wheelhouse. But the ones I knew, I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah.
All right, so I think that's probably good enough general impressions. I think the real discussion for this show will involve spoilers because there were some really cool twists during this first season. With that in mind, from this point forward, we're probably going to be discussing spoilers. So if you haven't seen the first season of Westworld, you can pause this now and come back to us after you finish the first season. This is your final warning. Spoilers to follow for Westworld.
Wee-oo, spoiler! Wee-oo, spoiler! Something like that.
All right, we are in the spoiler zone, like the danger zone, but the spoiler zone. So, anything you want to start with? Like, I have some bullet point questions I think we can try to get to if we sort of get off track. But I don't know if there's anything specific you want to start with.
My first question, pretty much the only question I thought of ahead of time. What would you do if you were in Westworld?
Ooh. As much as I feel like I would try to be a goody two shoes, like I'd be the guy picking the white hat coming in. I don't know if I would go full Man in Black by the end. I feel like I might have to dabble a little bit and like just kill somebody just to see what the hell that's like. But for the most part, I'd probably like he helped the what was it, Billy or William helps the old guy off the ground and he goes, "Oh, you want to go on a treasure hunt?" It's like, oh, I could probably go for a treasure hunt. That could be kind of cool.
That's kind of where I think I would be. I'd be in that wheelhouse of like, oh, it's like a mission. Yeah, I'd look at it like a video game. Like, right. I've got objectives. Let's go do this. And, like I'd probably try and find the one tracking down the bandit just because, that would have like the most action-intense moments in it, I would think. But I think it's an interesting question because everybody's going to have a different answer to what they would do in a place like this.
Yeah.
Some people aren't going to admit the truth. There's going to be people who would go in and just, fuck as many of the androids as they possibly could. And, that, hey, if that's what you are inside, that's fine. They're androids. It's,
I guess if
weird.
They don't specify how much people are paying to get in there, but you have to imagine it's an absorbent amount of money.
They actually did.
Did they?
Yeah, at one point, William's brother-in-law, I can't remember his first name.
Logan.
He says, I'm not paying $40,000 a week for us to be here. So $40,000 a week. That's a lot of money. But we're also led to believe
do whatever the fuck you want.
Well, it's also in the future here. I'm assuming this is so depending on how far in the future it is, that could be, the same money as today, or dollars could be like yen. So we really don't know that. But most of the time when a show would reference something like that, they would assume that people today are referencing $40,000 a week as to what it would be today. Which, honestly, for a resort like that, would not be out of line pricing with what other high-end resorts charge today, because I can tell you from personal experience, not that I've gone, because I don't have that kind of money, but there's fishing lodges that charge you $10,000 a week.
Jeez.
It's all inclusive, all your booze, all your food, everything like that. So this one's including your booze, your food, killing a few people, fucking a few people, So, I can see that price being in line.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I was going to spin off somewhere from your... Oh, I like that, you referenced how the treasure chest, or looking for the treasure thing, was kind of like a video game quest. And I like the way they played that in the show, because they alluded to it exactly the same way. Logan's trying to tell them, oh, ignore that guy, because that's just a point. He's just going to lead you to this dead end somewhere, not going to be able to find it. It's going to be not worth your time. Just skip it and get... He's that one guy that's sitting on the couch telling you how to play the game while you're trying to play it for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. That's perfectly put. I mean, to me, I think, like, one of the biggest questions I also had with this whole thing is, how are the guests able to identify themselves from the hosts? Other guests, not necessarily yourself. Obviously, you know how to do that, and the people are with you, but there is other people there. And, so the guests themselves have live ammunition, and the hosts do not. So, couldn't guests technically accidentally end up killing other guests?
Yeah, because me and my other buddy, that was actually a friend of mine, Chris, I'll give you a shout out, started watching the show before me, and I was asking him about it, and he sort of gave me the recommendation to check it out, so I finally sat down and watched it. So him and I were talking about this before, and we had the same question, like, how do what is in the game or in this world preventing humans from killing each other? So we sort of theorized that maybe the firearms they're getting were maybe more in line with the firearms that the hosts have. So the hosts can shoot other hosts, but as soon as they aim that gun at a person, they either can't pull the trigger, or we'll just say it goes off and doesn't do anything. So maybe there's something in the firearms that knows, like, I'm pointing at a human, so I can't. It's preventing you from firing on another human. However, everybody has daggers and knives. What's preventing another human from slicing another human's throat? They never address that.
Choking them to death.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
I mean, because you could still put a shock collar type thing inside a knife that would prevent you in some way from stabbing somebody, but
that's true, yeah.
Nothing you could do to prevent somebody from choking somebody else out. So
yeah, because there's a few times when, like, the guests are just in somewhere, and as the characters we're following are having a full-on conversation, either one of them or someone around them just gets shot by someone that just wants to shoot somebody.
Yeah.
And if they go on these shooting sprees, it's like, it's one of those questions that they never answer. They just kind of, like, play it off like it doesn't happen, and that's sort of good enough for the show. Because I was waiting for that to show. I really thought, like, the way that Logan was pushing William and pushing his buttons early in his storyline, I figured this was going to be the first casualty. This is where we're going to find out that William's finally just going to snap and kill Logan. And that would answer my question, but they never play that way.
No. Yeah, that was actually something I expected to happen. It honestly, a few different points I thought it was coming. Where it's like, oh, here, okay, he's gonna kill him now.
Yeah.
Like right after he cuts her open and shows him, like, the inside is mechanical.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, like, as soon as he gets loose here, he's gonna fucking kill him. like this isn't gonna be good. So
let's actually spin off from there, because that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about, is the reveal of the Man in Black.
Yes.
Now, that was one of those things that I think people were theorizing about online that I'm glad I didn't read, was this whole multiple timelines thing.
Yes.
How the stuff with William and, I can't think of her name. What's Evan Rachel Wood's character's name? Why am I blanking?
Now
you're blanking.
Daisy? No, it's not Daisy. Hold on.
She's the main fucking character, and I can't think of her name.
Yeah, that's not good. Dolores.
That's it. Yes. William and Dolores is like she's remembering stuff, like from years ago. I didn't put that together until right at the scene that you were talking about, where Logan finally shows William that Dolores is an android, like a robot. And then when he wakes up and, like, the whole army that they were camping with is slaughtered.
Right.
And then that was when I started figuring out, like, oh shit, like, he's the Man in Black. And then, like, everything started to click, like how the Man in Black recognizes people that you just, like, Ed Harris's character throughout the show is, every time he comes across someone, he references them and talks to them like he's known them before. And you just kind of attribute that to, oh, he just spent so much time in here. He's just one of those people that pays his time, spends more time in Westworld than the outside world. So he obviously must have came across these people at some other time. And as we start seeing William's story, you see him come across all these same characters. And at the time, I'm just thinking, oh, okay, the people that Ed Harris came across, they're probably just dead. They just, like, bring them back to life and put them back in Westworld. And now this William guy's coming across them too. It didn't run, not until right at that second when he slaughtered everybody that it occurred to me that, oh shit, like, he's referencing and talking to people that William talked to, because that's him way back in the day. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know, that whole thing just kind of blew my mind.
I figured out the different timelines thing a different way. Okay. I was actually onto the idea that Bernard was Arnold
Oh, okay.
Fairly shortly into it, I figured out that there was multiple timelines going on when he's, talking to Dolores and, like he leaves her in that room in the basement there that you later find out was in that other part of town that they had closed down.
Like the first lab or whatever.
Right. And like, I figured, like, okay, as soon as that happened, I was like, he left her clothed in what she would wear normally in the basement and just left her there. And then it started to like roll on like, okay, there's a different timeline going on here.
Yeah, see, I didn't even pick that up.
That led me to, well then, this must be that he's Arnold, that he's this Arnold we've been talking about this whole time. Because, one, yeah, of course, who the hell else was it going to be? It was either him or Ed Harris that was going to be Arnold. Like, and it was like, okay, it's not Ed Harris. Like, I figured that out early enough, but the idea that it was him being an android as well, that was, once again, as soon as you figured out there was multiple timelines and they had said Arnold was dead, it was either they're lying or he's an android.
Yeah, see, the android thing never even occurred to me. I just assumed, like, that Anthony Hopkins knew who this Arnold person was, and he knew exactly where he was, and just tells everybody that he's dead, so that they sort of stayed away from him and weren't looking for him.
Right.
And, because those episodes, I think, happen back to back. Like, the one episode, we finally get the reveal that Bernard is a host, and then the next episode, you find out that Bernard is modeled after Arnold.
Right.
And that was like, holy shit, like back-to-back episodes where I was like, what the fuck? Because even like the scene where they, I assumed there was going to be someone in the program that's like programming the robots that has to also be a robot. Like that would just be a cool twist. I didn't think it was going to be Bernard. But when him and Teresa, I think, went to that one house that Ford had with the family.
Yes.
And they're poking around in there. And Bernard's giving Teresa the speech of like, she asked like, well, how come nobody's seen this before? And he said something along the lines of like, well, the host could walk right past this and not even see it because they're not programmed to. And then she goes, well, what about this door? And he goes, what door? I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, that was the moment where that was like the reveal moment where it was like, we're not going to say it, but
I didn't think they'd like
for sure.
confirm it right after that. I thought it was going to be like they'd leave you with that line of him not being able to see the door, and then you have to think about it for an episode or two before they finally like, oh, look, he's a robot.
I mean, I think it made it fairly obvious given the way they sequenced it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, it wasn't, like, after that, I don't feel like it was as much of a reveal because it's like, he just says, like, oh, well, they only see what we want them to see, and she sees the door, he doesn't. It's like, well, one of them is.
I had to like rewind that part because I was like, did I just hear what I think I heard? Like, is this where it's going? Did I catch this?
Well, I actually did the same thing, but the thing I did, because the way the movie, or the episode, the way the episode was cut, I wasn't sure if he was in the same room as her when he said it.
Oh, okay.
So, the way it was cut the first time I watched it, I was like, was he actually in the room asking that? Or was he looking at the space where she's like, the door, right here? And yeah, he was, but it wasn't obvious the first time through that he was right there in the room.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that was an interesting aspect to the whole thing that I didn't necessarily... It's one of the things I don't feel like they tied together as well as I would have liked.
Which part?
I still don't understand the motivation for Anthony Hopkins' character, whose name was...
Ford.
To have created the android in the image of Arnold. Because it seemed like that ended not so well between the two of them, of course.
See, I think it was more... at least I interpret it more as like they were friends up until the end, and it was more Arnold's decision, and like that maybe Ford didn't take it personally. Like, almost like he didn't see it coming, and then Arnold did his thing, and then he was just kind of left to pick up the pieces, but, like, I still get the impression that he understood where Arnold was coming from, Because really, by the end of the series, or the end of the first season, I feel like Ford is more in line with what Arnold wanted to do. Like, the majority of the season, I think, seems to set Ford up as like a bad guy. But by the finale, you figure out that he's accepted the fact and almost like pushing for these hosts to gain a consciousness, which is what Arnold was trying to do in the first place.
Yes.
Like he empathized with the hosts and wanted to find artificial intelligence, more or less, and have them become more human and lifelike. And by the end of the season, I think that's where Ford was at too.
See, I got the impression that what Ford was doing, at least to play a little bit of devil's advocate, I guess I could say.
Okay.
Was that he was more so trying to recreate a synthetic consciousness. Maybe not necessarily make them actually conscious, but make them appear to be.
See, I thought that was the whole reason of the game. Or the maze. The maze.
Well, I mean, but the maze was Arnold's creation.
Right, but he's not trying to stop the hosts from, like, Dolores, he could have at any point stepped in and be like, okay, we're not going to let you find the end of the maze to figure this out.
Right.
But he doesn't. I think he knows exactly what she's doing and he lets her do it.
And it brings up another point that I'm going to get to very briefly. Because, well, it's something that came to my mind, and that now that you're right there, I don't want to forget to bring it up. To me, at the very least, the search for the maze that Dolores is going through is enough to signify that she has consciousness.
Yes.
Hunting the maze is not part of her loop.
Right.
And going off script I think it's an error for the show a little bit, because it's not just Dolores that goes off script. There's several of these things that go off script, and I think going off script, period, is a development of at least artificial consciousness, if not actual consciousness, because this is supposed to be the future. Okay, so we know how well we can program video games today.
Yeah.
And video games never go off script. Like, things play out the way they're supposed to play out because it's written in code. Code doesn't change. And so he is either writing into her code for her to look for the maze, which thereby negates the idea of it signifying consciousness.
Well, they play with the idea, and this is maybe the way I interpreted it, because the pilot episode kicks off with, they've had an update to the hosts where they can start to access almost like memories. Mm-hmm. And that influences a little like improvisation with some of the stuff that they do when they're in their loops. And then that starts to grow exponentially, where certain hosts begin to remember past events even after they were like wiped from their memory, which is what drives Maeve, which is what drives Dolores, and I guess
the bandit guy.
Yeah.
Ends up killing.
Yeah, I can't think of his name right now either.
He's insignificant as a character. He plays a plot point, but
yeah,
as a character, he's insignificant.
But yeah, you're right. There are other people besides Dolores that have that happen to them, and I think that comes back to that programming update. So maybe they don't have to go through the maze to get their consciousness and evolve that way. Maybe it's just part of, because I even think they say it at one point that the accessing memories is the last step for the hosts to be able to gain a consciousness and stuff like that. Like because they weren't able to do that before, and it kept them in their loops and kept them in check. And as soon as they were able to do that, that was like the missing link for them to put all the pieces together and start thinking for themselves. And I think, because doesn't Arnold say something about that? Like for their consciousness, at first it was like his voice telling Dolores what to do. And eventually he wanted that to be her voice telling herself what to do.
Right.
Which is the whole point of the maze.
Well, I mean, in general, anytime you talk about this stuff, it's always self-awareness is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And if you're programmed into doing the same thing day in and day out, and you do the same thing day in and day out, that's not self-awareness. That's just doing what you do. You may seem self-aware, but you actually are not. Yeah. Going off script and doing what you think you should do, as soon as that word think comes into it, where it's actually thinking about a unique thing that has not been told to do, you have consciousness. Because in that instant you become self-aware. Because it's doing its own thing. And in doing your own thing, you have become self-aware. So, which is kind of the point I was making as to at what point did he program them to encourage self-awareness? Or did he, because if you do it, then it's not necessarily, like if you program her to go on a hunt for the maze, she's not making that decision herself. If you let them access the memories, and you let them figure it out on their own, it's not necessarily, and it's still not necessarily consciousness, because they're only accessing memories and going back to things they've been trained to do.
Okay, I guess I see. Yeah, because I was going to argue that it's not so much she was programmed to find the maze. It was that she had access to memories of having found the maze or being told about the maze before.
Right.
And that was what helped her come around. But yeah, I guess that's true.
It's one of the, like I said, with the existential questions, it's one of those things, at what point does machine become man?
Yeah.
And in this case, I think that if we assume Dolores pieces together bits about the maze herself, and then decides to seek out the answer herself, then she could have developed consciousness. But at any point, if there's outside influence in programming telling her to do any of that, I would argue that would negate the consciousness. That would negate the acquisition of consciousness.
Yeah, the only one that they allude to where their decisions might not actually be their own is Maeve, Thandie Newton's character.
Right. Because supposedly that was going to be like Ford had programmed her to try and escape. It was the escape program.
Do we know it was Ford, though? They never tell us who programmed her.
I suppose we don't know that it was Ford, but who else would it have been?
Well, here's the thing.
Maybe Bernard would be the only other one.
Well, he was the one that accessed it and said, like, hey, somebody messed with your code. So he didn't seem like he acknowledged that he was the one that did it. When I was talking to my buddy Chris about this, he had an interesting theory that there was a storyline or a plot thread that they set up that they never touched on. And it might be a little bit of a leap to assume that Maeve is the one that picked it up. Earlier on, I think it was like maybe middle-ish of the season, they had that one, I can't remember her name now either, but the one board member that was coming in trying to like start to whip Westworld into shape and get things, I guess, prepared for when they were going to vote Ford out.
Right.
She talks to the lead narrative guy.
Yes.
And they go down to the basement, they find an empty host, and she says, implant this guy with information and get him out of here. We never see that guy again. We don't know what happened to them. We don't know if they actually succeeded in their mission to get information out of the park using that specific host. The only other theory that my buddy Chris had was that Maeve, instead, is the one that's programmed with information to leave the park, and why she suddenly has this undying need to escape.
Right. And given the outcome of that, I would say that Ford also either knew about it and prevented it, or...
See, I think right at the end is when she snaps awake. Like, everything in her programming is telling her to leave. And she finally makes a decision on her own to go back and look for her daughter.
Right, but it's not her real... It's like, that's the point I come back to, is that it's not... The memory that she's accessing is a memory of previous programming.
Yes.
And so she's going to go back and look for this daughter that is, in her mind, dead, right?
Well,
but she also finds out that, okay, so the thing's been, like she knows what they are, they get repaired, okay.
Right.
But, I don't know, there's a lot of answers here to grasp with about android consciousness that it's really hard.
Like, even in Maeve's flashback, when Ed Harris, like, killed the two of them, and she almost, like, killed herself or was, like, really, really torn up about losing her daughter. And I think they even allude to it then that might be the first step of her sort of, like, thinking for herself, because she was never programmed to act that way. It's almost like motherly instinct taking over.
Right.
Which is sort of how I interpreted the end. Like, her motherly instinct for whether or not, we all know, and she probably even knows, that this daughter that she had is another robot programmed to be her daughter. But the motherly instinct at that point is so intense that either she doesn't care or she wants to, I don't know, try to get the daughter to remember, and they can, I don't know, be one little happy robot family together. I don't know.
See, that's the point where it comes again, where, like, to me, like, if you didn't program that motherly instinct, it's awfully, in my mind at least, it's awfully hard for that motherly instinct to be there without estrogen.
Oh, fair enough.
Because as far as we know, at least today, that's, the cause of most female instinct, and testosterone causes most male instinct.
Mm-hmm. Getting all scientific all of a sudden in this.
I mean, that's not that.
We're teaching science class for all the listeners here. Mike Bradley's the professor.
It just seems like it's a bit of a leap to say that an android that isn't programmed to can develop motherly instinct.
Yeah.
Because, like, consciousness is one thing, but instinct, I would say, is a full-on further part of humanity that perhaps nobody's addressed yet, that perhaps is something that really puts a hole in their theories about android becoming human. At what point are they human? I still say they're not going to get those instincts without programming. But, that being said,
so I don't even remember what the actual, like, question was that we were trying to answer, but I think we got, like, we just sort of, like, shot a shotgun at, like, we're very sporadic on what the hell we're talking about here. So I don't even remember what the hell we started on.
Yeah. It started, honestly, I think we've just kind of rolled from the beginning right into where we're at.
Yeah, because I don't even think, like, any of the questions we've posed to each other, I don't think we've actually answered. I think it's just us theorizing about a bunch of stuff which there is no definitive answer for.
Yes, I mean, but that's what you're going to get when you're talking about, artificial consciousness.
Yeah.
So, there is only theorizing to be done. So, what I will...
No, good. Good.
I was going to say, one of the things that I think is very cool about all this that I found out from you, and then a little more after, and you piece everything together a little bit, that Michael Crichton based a lot of the story of Jurassic Park off of his writing of Westworld.
Okay.
The whole idea of, okay, so you have this park, things go wrong. The original Westworld, if you don't know, I have never watched it. I read a synopsis. It takes a different turn than this does. The androids start killing people in the park. They start being able to turn. I mean, this kind of takes that turn, but, like, not rampantly and openly, where it's like a man versus machine, battle going on in the park. You have that aspect. Then you have the industrial espionage aspect of her trying to come in and get this out of the park into somebody else. Dennis Nedry steals a bunch of embryos, tries to get them out of the park and to somebody else.
Yeah.
So a lot of these, I mean, whether you realize it or not, watching the movie Jurassic Park, read the book, that is a huge storyline within it. It's the reason that you get the Lost World, and if you want to extrapolate it out to Jurassic World, go right ahead. I really don't care if you do or not. But you can say that in the novels, that is a huge part of the story that he tells, in that it's a story about the dinosaurs and the people around the dinosaurs, yes, but it's also a story about the corrupt nature inherent in new ideas that are extremely profitable. And so is this show. And, I mean, there's even more throwbacks within Jurassic Park, the movie and the book, to Westworld in and of itself. If you remember in Jurassic Park, I want to say it's Gennaro, the lawyer guy. They're taking the tour of the place, and they make a very specific point of having him ask if the people working in the lab are animatronics. If he asked that question, they actually touch on a few things if you watch. And the original writing for Westworld, I do believe, was where he came up with the idea of chaos theory.
Oh, okay.
And it's a very interesting aspect of it that he realized it would, one, just be freaking cooler to do it with dinosaurs. Who doesn't like real dinosaurs? Why not?
Yeah.
And two, more profitable. Let's face it, you put a bunch of dinosaurs out there, every child on Earth is going to want to go and see that movie, and then children like myself are also going to want to go and see that movie, which is why Jurassic World did so well. Yeah, the movie as a story sucked, but you're going to get me to go see it because you have dinosaurs. So,
that was almost exactly, I think it was exactly 20 years later, because 73 was Westworld, 1993 I think was Jurassic World, or Jurassic Park, Jurassic World.
Mm-hmm.
They all sound the same.
Jurassic, just call it the Jurassic franchise.
Yeah, the Jurassic series, the first one. I'm trying to look at some of my bullet points here. So the pilot episode, when I first started watching it, I was like thinking that James Marsden was a human.
At the very beginning of it, yes.
That twist
you get that
was,
impression.
I thought, really, really cool.
Yeah, it was an initial twist, where they didn't drag it out long before you found out that he wasn't human, but it was a very cool thing to set you up for the other twists that were to come.
Yeah.
It was definitely a fooler, because you definitely, watching that, you get the idea that he's visiting the park.
And
they put him on the train.
Every conversation he has, like even when he meets Dolores, it's like, oh, you've been gone. It's like, oh, okay, so he left the park and came back.
Yeah.
Great, this is going to work out awesomely.
Yeah, like he's so in love with his android. What a pathetic prick.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, he's an android. Never mind. I feel bad for calling the android pathetic now, but...
I feel bad for James Marsden, because all he does is die over and over and over again.
Well, I mean, even the Man in Black says, that's what your duty is to die.
Yeah, you're here to lose, so everybody else can win.
Yep. And, I that was another aspect of this that I absolutely loved, was the repetition. Where, you come in, and these people come into the park, and they're experiencing the same thing the people before them experienced. Perhaps. There is, the perchance case where, you take off with one of these androids for a few days on a storyline. Like the whole week that you're there, you take up the one android and nobody else gets to experience that.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing happening every day. And I found that very interesting, seeing like the differences that can happen. And, it just made me think about all the craziness that goes into programming something like that.
Yeah.
Because, there's obviously the set program where if nobody picks up that can of condensed milk that she drops, that Teddy comes by and Teddy picks it up and they go on their part of that story, and then they can take part in a different part of a story that happens later on with like the people invading the house. If somebody were to play along with them like Ed Harris does, the Man in Black does, and end up showing up to rob the house. They, that was the reason they came to the park. They want to rob and pillage and do what they want. Well, they can take part in that storyline. But if somebody picks up that condensed can of milk, it can start a whole different storyline.
Yeah.
So I found that very interesting. Very well thought out, I would say.
Yeah. It was almost, Groundhog Day-esque, kind of.
Yes. If that thing would have played the same song every morning, and what was the song in Groundhog Day?
Ah, shit. No, I can't remember.
If it would have played that one, that would have been great.
Yeah.
Whatever that song was, I can't remember right now. It's been a while.
The saloon
since
version of that
Groundhog
song
Day.
is they're coming in on the train every time it resets. Would be great.
Yeah, my annual watching Groundhog Day is coming up in a few weeks. So.
You report back on what song it is.
Yeah, I'm almost a year off of watching it, so give me a break.
There's people screaming at us probably. You can't remember the fucking song.
Yeah. Hey, it is what it is.
Trying to think what else I got here. Oh, I don't really know where I'm framing this question, but they had the whole personality of Wyatt. Like they started introducing Wyatt in I think like the second half of the season.
Yes.
And I kind of really liked the way that played out. Is that the first time that that Teddy starts talking about it is, Wyatt massacred the city. I was the only survivor. And then you play it again, and him and Wyatt are taking people out. And then, like, either the second or third time, he's in a sheriff's outfit instead of a military uniform. And then, like, the last time you see it is finally him and Dolores slaughtering everybody. And it starts to piece everything together. I just thought that was a really cool, slow reveal. Because Wyatt's never actually a person, like another person. That's just a personality that they put in Dolores, right?
Yeah, Wyatt was supposed to be something that they put into Dolores. I didn't understand it necessarily. I like the idea, but I don't know why they did it.
I think for all intents and purposes, Wyatt was supposed to be a host. It was supposed to play out like exactly the way Teddy sees it, I think. Or at least he was supposed to be a nemesis for Teddy somewhere. Now, when Arnold figured out that he was going to destroy the park, instead of putting that personality in a different host, he just added it to Dolores and let her go apeshit.
See, I thought it went the other way around, that Dolores just kind of went apeshit.
I'm almost positive when Arnold was talking about like what his plan to, like, if he fucks it up bad enough that Ford won't be able to fix it, that it's one of those times I think he's sitting talking to Dolores and he picks up his pad and it brings up the Wyatt personality, and the way he's like tapping around in there, I interpreted it from what I remember of him imprinting that personality to Dolores.
Okay. I mean, the way I kind of felt about it, and what I'm remembering, was
go
more
back
along.
And watch all this stuff and make sure I get all these details right.
Yeah, it's tough to remember them all because once again, this is a lot of repetition in this show. So you're piecing together things that happened several times and trying to pick out which individual moments happened when. Yeah. But the way that I had saw that was that Dolores she had solved the maze, and she had developed her own consciousness, and they had to program it out of her after she did that. After she kind of went off the rails and did that, and they had to find some sort of solution to that problem. And then when they were creating all the new, because Wyatt evidently was an idea that Arnold had.
Right.
And I think when they were creating all the new memories, and like when they released the memories into them, with the reveries, letting them have those little memories, they knew this was going to come back, so they created the character of Wyatt and gave him that memory and altered it so that he would remember it that way and not remember it being Dolores, which would cause some sort of like fatal exception within his programming.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the way I looked at the whole Wyatt thing. I don't know how correct it is. I don't know if that's what they intended, but that was kind of the way that I had saw it.
Yeah, because I think I kept like when they started name dropping Wyatt is like this big bad for the new narrative or whatever they added to the narrative, I expected some big showdown type of thing to happen in the finale with this Wyatt character.
Right.
Especially just from, Teddy's memories of the event of like, this one dude just massacring people. So yeah, when it became the reveal that it was Dolores, I was just kind of thrown aback. I think with it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to rewatch that sequence to get a better grasp on it. I think because I mean it was a very convoluted thing that they did with it for story purposes, in my opinion. Just because of kind of what you said, they had it happen all these different ways, and I'm not actually recalling whether or not they explain well why Teddy remembers it so many different ways. Like, why does it get remembered all these different ways is what
I think the way you described
with.
it, I think I can get on board with, where when they first sort of let him access that memory, they change a little bit, so he's not seeing what he's supposed to be seeing. And because you're left to assume, like, as the season goes on, it seems like Teddy is getting closer and closer and closer to
the truth of it.
Yeah. And each time he dies, he comes back, he remembers a little bit more, or a little bit slightly different. And then finally he remembers everything, like the way it actually happened.
Yeah.
So I think I think that falls in line with the way you described it. I think that would work and explain it for me anyway.
Yeah, and that works. That works for me. You know, the first time he remembers it, he sees what they imprinted as Wyatt into his brain.
Right.
And then it starts to slowly come to reality.
Right. There were a few, I think, at least one unanswered question, I think, for me. Like, do you remember the security guy? Like the head of security, I think, guy? He was the other Hemsworth.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
So he goes to investigate something. He gets attacked by, I think, Indians, and then we never see him again. Do we think he's still alive? I assumed he got captured and then was going to show up later, but he never does.
That's a good question. I don't have an answer for that one, actually.
Okay.
Because, you know, I remember very distinctly what you're talking about, and I never even thought about the fact that he didn't come back until you brought it up. Yeah, I think they could play that route, that he's still alive. They're going to need some people to carry over for the second season, of course. They have whoever listed as being part of the next season.
Which season 2 isn't happening until 2018.
Yes.
So we have a while to wait.
It looks like they have 4 people, and that's it, that they have confirmed for both seasons.
So Dolores, James Marsden, Bernard.
No.
Yeah, Bernard's not in the... They don't have Jeffrey Wright in there?
They have him for 1 episode in the second season, and that's it.
That's probably a spoiler.
But Ed Harris, James Marsden, Thandie Newton, and Evan Rachel Wood are the only ones they list to be in all episodes of the second season. And Jeffrey Wright is the only other character listed to be in one of them.
I swear to God, if he dies in the first episode, I'm gonna be mad at you.
Well, he's an android at this point, so technically he doesn't die.
You know what I mean. I like that guy and that character. If he only shows up for 1 episode and something happens to him.
Well, it's IMDb. They have been wrong before.
They better be, those motherfuckers.
Well, but for me, the interesting thing, drawing into season 2 next year, probably in the fall, so it's probably almost full 2 years away, is the one big reveal they had at the end that we haven't talked about. It was in the last episode. Maeve is running away with the bandit guy and the bandit guy's friend, and they come across SW doors. And they go through the SW doors, and there's a bunch of guys dressed like samurais.
Yeah, are we getting Samurai World?
And well, it brings up, so it's Samurai World there, Westworld there. How many is there?
Yeah.
Is it just Westworld and Samurai World? Or do we have, as many of these parks as they could put on the land that they have to make up, a whole catalog list of video games?
That would be a fun season too, though. Like putting a few Westworld characters into this Samurai World and see what they do.
Yeah. Or into a different... Samurai World, I don't know. I feel like that would be... I don't think they're going the samurai world route, but I mean, I think it would be interesting to see this done in a real world context. Like maybe because it's in the future, they have like the 80s world or the 90s world or something like that, where it's modern era for us.
Yeah.
That they're in the real world, but it's not the real world kind of thing, where, I think that would be interesting, is that, say the second season jumps along, it can't jump that far in scope if Ed Harris is back, because he's not an android. The other three are, so it could jump as far as they wanted.
Right.
But with him still being present, I don't think they could jump so far forward that they managed to create an entire modern city of these things, where there's, thousands of people working in an Empire State Building or something, I don't think they could go that far into the future with Ed Harris, but I think although they did play with multiple timelines in this one.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he figures out how to put his consciousness into an android.
I liked how by the end of it he sort of got his wish, and Ford. I think all right. Correct me if I'm wrong. The way this plays out is like I'm guessing is sort of like his last goodbye. He ups the stakes and allows the safeguards for these empty hosts, the ones that were in that basement. It looked like, because that basement was cleared out by the end.
Yes.
So I'm assuming he retasked all those empty hosts with whatever programming he wants to that allows them to kill everybody? Or do you think that they just suddenly woke up and they're conscious and they don't care about rules anymore?
Well, that goes once again back to the gun question.
I mean, Ed Harris very visibly gets shot in the arm.
Right. And I think that in order for that to work, that the gun, when it's pointed at somebody that's a human, has to be taken away and replaced with a real one.
Well, I think that was the whole thing around the gun that Dolores was using, right? That was the same gun that she used to kill Arnold.
Yes.
Which apparently is able to use live ammunition, or is not beholden to the safeguards of preventing her from shooting people.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that was actually something else with the guns that I did notice, is that during the storyline with William, when they get shot, it still hurts a little.
Yeah.
Like, they feel it. But it does not seem like the Man in Black timeline that Ed Harris's character even is feeling them.
Yeah.
And I feel like that may be improvements that they made, where perhaps the gunshot wounds that you see are artificial. Everybody's firing blanks. Nobody has actual bullets in their guns, but it feels like there is, and because where you shoot looks like there is, perhaps that has some effect.
Right. Gotcha.
I don't know, though. It's hard to say.
You have to see. We'll have to see where they go with it and what they end up doing. It's the way they ended it. Like, Anthony Hopkins gets shot in the back of the head. They start wiping out that crowd. Like, I'm curious to see who makes it out of there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, among the people in there, obviously Anthony Hopkins is gone. That much is very obvious. Ed Harris, spoiler alert, I did just tell you he's going to be in next season, but once again, we did have Arnold and Bernard, so nothing says that he's alive.
Real quickly, too, because me and my buddy were talking about this. Would you put it past Ford to somehow have like a cyborg clone of himself? Like waiting in the wings? Or do you think he'd actually go out like that, being shot in the head by Dolores, and then that be it? Or do you think he'll come back as a robot?
Or do you think the cyborg's what got shot?
Or, yeah, that too.
Absolutely possible. Of course.
Okay.
And that would be the type of spoiler that IMDb wouldn't allow on their page.
Good. At least they keep some things to themselves.
Yes. That would be the type of thing that they would not tell anyone about, and they would keep a spoiler.
Yeah.
They would make sure that was the case. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're talking about a world of androids where you have one that can be made into the exact replica of another human, all bets are off on who's alive and who's dead.
Do you want to go one way or the other? Do you think that was a robot? Do you think Anthony Hopkins will come back, or do you think that was actually Ford? And that's it?
I think that was actually Ford.
Okay, yeah, that's where I'm leaning too.
But the whole idea I was saying was, somebody else decides to write them back in for season 3.
Yeah.
You have that option because you have androids. You
can't
ever close that door.
Yeah, it would be, I feel like, a little bit more poetic if he went out like this and this was the end of Ford. Like, for his storyline for season 1, I think that arc for him worked actually pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's all you need from Ford. It was a fitting end, and if you take that away by bringing him back, that would be bad for the overall story.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the good things. I think, like, as much as that sucks, we're not getting Westworld Season 2 in 2017, I think it's better that they wait for 2018 because it gives them that extra year to hash out a story and make sure it works. And if they think they're going to get other seasons, to even plot something out for a couple seasons to play. Because, television seasons are so rushed. Like, they have all the time in the world to plan season 1 well. It's a hit, so then they're like, churn another one out right now, and then it's never as good the second time around.
No.
So I'm glad they're getting the time to do it that way.
Yeah, it seems like most shows that take their time and really put the effort in over the 2 years, they really do turn out very well.
Yeah. Not
many do it, but a few that do, it works. Usually.
Yeah. All right, I think we've touched on pretty much everything I wanted to. It was a little bit scatterbrained. It wasn't as nice and neat as I wanted it to, but I think we hit most of the bullet points I had. I think we'll just end with, do you have a favorite character?
Wow, that's not something I gave thought to, but I do. I like the... I'm just going to look up his name real quick. I have the IMDb open, but it's one of those things where my brain doesn't work as well as everybody else's, I guess. Hector.
Yeah, that was the gangster leader guy.
He was the bandit.
Yeah.
He was the one rolls into town, starts shooting everybody up. I thought he was great. To me, he had the funniest line in the entire thing. He had the best line in the entire series. The corporate chick is screwing him or whatever. And, he's an android. And the corporate chick's screwing him. And she answers the door naked to the other woman, and she said, "Oh, great. Does she want to join?" And it's like, it's an android guy, and he's still asking if we want the other woman to come in. So at some point, somebody programmed that robot to be like, 3-way.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, that's not the only reason I like the character. I just thought, I thought he would have the coolest arc if you were in there, and I enjoyed the actor. The actor's name is Rodrigo Santoro. Never heard of him before. But
I don't think I recognize him either.
And very well done role.
Yeah. Yeah, I really wanted to say Teddy. Like, even though he died just over and over again, there was something about him that I latched onto. Maybe because he's the first one you really see and follow for a while.
Yeah.
But I really, really, really liked the arc that they did with Ed Harris. So I think him and young William, the two of them together, and the timeline, that kind of thing, I think that I really latched onto that. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was, to me, those were my favorite moments in the story, was following Ed Harris. I mean, that was the most exciting, interesting, mysterious stuff that they were doing.
Yeah. One other thing, too, because I didn't know this until after the fact. Did you realize that there was a small, short after credits scene after the finale?
No.
Do you want
me doing this with TV shows now too?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's real small.
Yeah, go ahead, tell me.
The bandit chick that was with Hector that got out with them and was running around the facility. At the last time we see her, her arm is stuck in a door.
Yep.
She's surrounded by security guys on either side of the door. With her hand stuck in the door, she's still holding the automatic weapon, so she shoots a couple guys that she can, and then the guys that are coming behind her, she literally, like, chops her arm off and leaves it in the door, and then just kind of smiles and then goes after them. So it's really it, but I think it sort of signifies to me, anyway, that at least her, I don't know if all the other hosts are doing this, but like that she sort of moved past, or she gained sort of like self-preservation. Like she didn't want to just sit there and die. She wants to continue on and live to the point where she will chop her own arm off and march forward.
That's an interesting thought to it. Hearing your description of it, I'd say that's going to lead to her having escaped.
Yeah, she could be the first one that's out in the real world somewhere.
Yeah, that would be my guess, but that's obviously just a guess.
We can report back if you want to. Like, you can check that out, like that 4-minute, 5-minute sequence, whatever it is, and come back to me and let me know what you think. Yeah, if you agree with my little assessment, or if you got something to add later. So yeah, I think that's probably where we'll wrap it up here. We probably could just keep theorizing and talking about the show forever, but I think we gotta try to wind it down. And I do want to save some room for other shows that I have coming up this month. I might actually be able to get one more in this month, and I know we have something planned for next week. So, and that'll probably be a long one. I think we're finally going to get around to our top 10 movies of 2016, and I think I have 4 other people lined up for that. So that'll, between 5 people's top 10 list, this could be a long and interesting podcast that we have coming. So that'll be one to look forward to. But if you've enjoyed the show, you can stop by iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and review. That would really help us out. You can be sure to share, subscribe, and favorite the show as well. You can also find us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/BryGuySuperFriends, or just search for Bry Guy and his Super Friends on Facebook. That will pop up the page as well. And that should be it for this. On behalf of Mike and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you all next time.